Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the Backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the upcoming book, actually the newly released book, The Only Witness, which is a Christian historical fiction tracing a possible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today, we're speaking with Alexei Lidov, and he is a longtime researcher and speaker on the Shroud, as well as on the Mandilion. And one of the things that's always interesting is what is the Mandilion and why is it important to Shroud studies? But before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about Alexei. Alexei Lidov, he graduated from the Art History Department of the Moscow State University in 1981. And he also defended his PhD thesis there a few years later. He is the head of the department at the Institute of World Cultures of the Moscow State University. He's the founder and director of the Research Center for Eastern Christian Culture in Moscow and a full member of the Russian Academy of Arts. And lastly, he's a member and fellow of the St. Catherine's College at Oxford University. I was reading his bio, and it's enormous. He's got many things that he's done. He's been awarded a fellowship at the Princeton Institute for Advanced Study. He's been awarded things at the College of France in Paris, the British Academy, the Getty Research Institute, and again at Princeton University, and in many other important institutions. And as I mentioned, his background is way too long for me to list out here. But lastly, I wanted to mention that he worked as an expert at UNESCO for the preservation of cultural heritage. He is a member of various organizations related to the studies of the Byzantine and medieval culture, as well as to the preservation of historical monuments. And one of the papers that I think for my audience that might find interesting, it's called The Holy Face, Holy Script, Holy Gate, and Revealing the Edessa Paradigm in Christian Imagery. And it's about this thing called the Mandilion. So Alexei, welcome and thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us, before we get started, so what is your backstory? How did you get involved in the Shroud of Turin and also in the Mandilion?
Uh, well, my original topic was the studies of the Holy Mandilion, and I did several papers on the relic of the Mandilion and its influence on the Christian iconography. And then I came across with the hypothesis that the Holy Mandilion and the Shroud of Turin was one and the same relic. And this version was promoted by Jan Wilson. He was the first one who pushed this theory. And then I realized that the material which I myself could check do not support this hypothesis. And first of all, the Byzantine sources, documents, they demonstrated clearly that the Mandilion and the Shroud were two relics who were preserved, kept simultaneously in one place. So the so-called the Pharos Chapel of the Virgin in the Great Palace of Constantinople. So and that was my way to studies of the Shroud of Turin, and well, it was important for me to understand how this hypothesis could appear, maybe why, and well, and several times I had to prove in various audiences that that is not true. So that we
Yeah.
are dealing with two different relics with absolutely different story, and well,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's also in other aspect I studied carefully the so-called the Byzantine history of the shroud, what we know about this relic in Byzantium. So and there are some very interesting evidence about this Byzantine story of the shroud, which really important because the shroud, um, the shroud, as we know, they appeared for public in France in the 14th century, but where it was before and how and where it was kept for several centuries. If we believe that the shroud is authentic relic from the times of Christ. Well, and so I did not believe in the theory and even scientific theory that shroud was a fake of the 14th century, which became very popular after investigation in several, labs in Oxford and other places. So, but I realized that well, that the theory is not proved, and in contradiction with the documents and information that we know from the Byzantine history. And the most important evidence about the shroud in Byzantium actually belongs not to a Greek author, but to Crusader, famous Crusader Robert de Clary, who left probably most important testimony about the capture of Constantinople in 1204. And in this text, he, indicated very clearly that there was a relic of the shroud, which at that time, I mean in 1204, was kept in the Blacherna church at the edge of the Byzantine capital. And he said that this important relic of the shroud had the image of Christ. That is very important. While we may guess image of Christ not made by human hands, and this relic, this shroud, was demonstrated for the public every Friday. So it means that probably some thousands of people could see it and demonstrated to the public, especially to see this icon not made by human hands, which was on the shroud. And then Robert de Clary said that during the capture of Constantinople, this most important relic disappeared, and nobody knows where it is. So, and I mean, Robert de Clary is principally very important and precise document. He fixed all details very carefully, and so it's quite trustful author, and it means we can be sure that certainly in the Byzantine capital, before 1204, existed the relic of the shroud with the image of Christ on it.
Yeah.
So, and then it disappeared, and as we know, it reappeared in approximately in 1.5 centuries in France. Another story discussed by many authors and researchers where the shroud could be in this period before the appearance in France in the Charny family. Well, and we know that there are several hypotheses. No one of these hypotheses was proved seriously based on the documents, but well, the most popular version was that this relic belongs to the Templars, and well, we're not able to prove it, but it's theoretically it's possible. Certainly, most probably, the relic of the shroud was stolen one of the Crusaders and came to the west as hundreds, if not thousands, other relics which were stolen in Constantinople in the same period. It was a special category of people among Crusaders who we now may call relic hunters. So they well had a special mission during this capture to find and to steal the most important Christian relics.
Yeah, very interesting. So now let's talk a little bit about the Mandilion. First of all, what is the Mandilion? What is that?
Well, so you mean the story of the Mandilion, the legend, how it appeared?
Yes.
Yes, and no, the legend is quite simple. The king of Edessa, called Abgar, sent his envoys to Christ. He heard, according to the legend, he heard about the miracles of Christ, and king himself, Abgar, I mean, was quite sick at that moment in Edessa. Edessa was a very important city in late antique Mesopotamia. Well, now it's in Turkey, the place it's called, now it's called Edessa, is called Urfa. Well, but it was a well, big, important, and in a way it was one of the major cultural centers in the east of the at the age of the Roman world. And so the king of Edessa heard about the miracles and sent in voice with a letter to Christ, asking him to come to Edessa and to, first of all, to heal Abgar and his family, and to get a lodge there. Well, and even in this letter, we can see the words that he wrote to Christ, that I have small but prosperous kingdom, so where you may feel yourself quite comfortable and safe. And well, but Christ didn't accept this invitation, but also another demand of Abgar to his envoys was to bring to Abgar the image of Christ. And one of the envoys was an artist with a special task to paint the image of Christ. And he tried to make this image, being nearby Christ and looking at him, but did not succeed. And then Christ saw this process and stopped the artist and said, well, I will give you the image. And he took a kind of towel and touched his face, and his image, imprinted on this towel, so which we call now the Mandilion. And he gave it to the envoy as his present and greetings to the king Abgar, who already believed in Christ, the first king in the world, by the way. And the artist brought this relic to Edessa, where it was kept for some centuries. But and so, according to the legend, Abgar baptized his kingdom, but for a while, because some of his ancestors, they some of his
descendants,
people some of his descendants who replaced him on the throne, they came back to paganism. And the local Christian decided that they need to save the two important relics. It was very important that Edessa had two most important relics. The letter of Christ, Christ replied to King Abgar. So the only letter in the world written by the hand of God, and the only image in the world, miraculous image, not made by human hands, and the very first image of Christ ever. So it means that Mandilion in Christian tradition was a kind of proto-relic, proto-image, proto-icon of all other pictures. But this proto-icon was not made by human hands, but appeared as a result of the divine power uh, and therefore the image itself was very important, and it was known in the Christian world, not very widely known, but quite known, and existed in Odessa until the 10th century, when in 944 this relic of the Mandilion, as a result of special agreements, I should say military agreements, as a result of the success of the Byzantine army near Odessa, because Odessa to that time, to 944, already became a Muslim city and belonged to the Arabic world. So and Byzantines agreed to make a peace with the Dacians, and even gave them a lot of money and release about 200 Dacian warriors, which were captured during the war. They promised to return them to Odessa in exchange of this relic. So in 944, it was brought to Constantinople, and it was a great event. Everybody knew about. It was a great event and a great procession. And when the relic of the Mandilion came to Constantinople and was accepted in the very solemn way, it was kept in the Pharos chapel of the Great Palace, and where already was collected almost all major relics of Christ's Passion. So it became one of the most important Passion relics of the Christian world. And since this moment, it became, first of all, one of the symbols of the Christian triumph over Arabs and Muslims, and one of the most important, if not the most important, Christian relic of the world. So, and also very interesting that most probably the emperor of Byzantium at that time, Constantine Porphyrogenetos, probably himself, he wrote the story of the Mandilion, which became a kind of canonical text, reproduced in many copies over the world and translated in many languages, and full of very interesting and authentic details about the image, how it was discovered, and how they could establish the authenticity of the image in Odessa. Because we should remember that by that time, by 10th century, in Odessa existed several copies of the miraculous image of Christ. And some of them were quite made by human hands. So there were several fakes, in our terms, of the original image, and Byzantines were smart enough. They knew about these fakes and about these copies and so on, and so they sent very professional investigators who took some time to reveal the so-called authentic image of the Mandilion. They made a special research, and they demanded, when they came to Odessa, to bring them all known copies from different churches, and then they could compare and reveal the original one. So it's a very interesting story, but and it's also amazing because it's maybe the first art historical investigation in the history. So, I mean, what several hundreds of other experts did afterwards had this example how to reveal the original image among many copies that's still actual in our times.
Right.
Well, we can remember, for example, the recent story of so-called Salvatore Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci, which was sold for $450 million. I mean, some years ago. So, but the first professional investigation was made in Odessa in 944.
Yeah, interesting. Let me ask you a question, though. Well, two things. One is that the Mandilion is, if it's true, is a image of the living God, and the shroud is an image of the, I guess, of the, the living God, but where the body is dead. And now you mentioned you used the word legend early on. So is the Mandilion story, is it a legend, do you think, or is it a true story that it truly is then an image of the living God from Jesus along with the letter?
You mean the story which was described by Constantine Porphyrogenetus? So, yes, I use the word legend because we have no scientific proofs and precise documents. The story about the letters and the image not made by human hands, I mean, the first evidence about this image not made by human hands appeared not earlier than in the 4th century. So it is not from the time of Christ.
Yeah.
So it's much later. It means at least 3 centuries later. And by the way, the first evidence, the earliest evidence about, and quite interesting, precise evidence about the relic of the letter belongs to famous Egeria. I mean, the aristocratic pilgrim from the West who came to the Holy Land in early 4th century, and she traveled a lot everywhere and was very well accepted everywhere. And probably she made a lot of important donations because she certainly was a very rich person. And he described this, the first description of the letter. By the way, the letter had 7 seals on it. Well, this letter with 7 seals was described by Egeria, but Egeria never mentioned the image of Christ, not made by human hands. It's also interesting. In this case, it's interesting is her silence about the image. Most probably the cult of the image was not promoted by the time of Egeria, if the image existed. So it means that, well, we may use the word legend or tradition, so, but just to say that is not a true positive story which we can prove. So
yeah, it makes very much
certainly sense. Behind all of these stories, including gospels themselves, well, there is something real.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a special aim of experts and historians to reveal this historical background of these legends or traditions and so on. So, and it's quite special and highly professional work.
Now, you mentioned Egeria. Eusebius also investigated the Mandilion. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yes, Eusebius, I don't remember that he did it. The first evidence about Mandilion appeared later. Eusebius, in his writings, he did not mention the Mandilion. And we should say, if you mean Eusebius of Caesarea. So, and at the same time, we should remember one interesting aspect for that period, especially for the 4th century and a bit later, that at that time it was a great discussion in the Byzantine Empire about the images and about the possibility to venerate the images. And Eusebius was one of the people who actually rejected the veneration of images and considered them as idolatry. So, there were different opinions, but still it was very touching point of discussion at that time. So maybe that, well, many people did not mention the image of Christ was connected to these sharp discussions about the images at that period.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's just a speculation from my side that I'm trying to. If the relic existed, it's one of the explanation why several authors did not mention it.
Yeah, interesting. So we have the Mandilion being brought to Constantinople in 944 AD by Constantine VII. Then we have the Fourth Crusade with Robert de Clary saying that he saw the shroud in 1204. The Fourth Crusade raped and pillaged the whole city of Constantinople, and many of the relics were lost. So what do you think happened to the Mandilion after the Fourth Crusade?
Well, we were able to reconstruct the story because in this case we have some documents, and one of the most important documents after 1204 was the contract between the Saint Louis or French King Louis IX and his relative Baldwin II, who was at that time the new king, Crusaders king in Constantinople. And Crusaders, after the capture of Constantinople and really great robbery, and they strangely enough had a great problems with money and could not survive properly. Probably the result of devastation of the biggest city in the Christian world. So, I mean, the economy collapsed, as we know in many other cases over the world. I mean, the big war resulted in the economical collapse. So, I mean, Baldwin II had troubles, but he could they could capture all relics which were kept in the Pharos Chapel, in this relic chapel of the Great Palace. And then, after some discussions and negotiations with Saint Louis, they made an agreement. They sold all relics from the Pharos Chapel to France for enormous amount of money. Crusaders received half of the annual budget of France at that time for this collection of relics. The most important of them was the crown of thorns, but the Mandilion was also there. And we have the document, we have the charter of Baldwin II with the list of all 22 relics from the Pharos Chapel. And Mandilion was among these relics, but not Shroud. It's interesting because Shroud disappeared, as we know, from another church, Blachярny church. And so the Saint Louis received this unique collection of the Passion relics from Constantinople, and it was a great event. And Another point, probably somebody would ask now, why he paid such amount of money for for such strange things as relics are. But it was well, if we consider it as historians, it was a great geopolitical project because Louis the Ninth wanted to make France the new capital of the Christian world. So how is possible to new capital of the Christian world if you don't have the most important relics? So the embodiment of the spiritual power. And so on, first of all, the most famous in the world, the crown of thorns. So he knew what he's doing, so he wanted to, and since that moment, by the way, Paris became a Paris. So, which we know now, I mean, one of the major centers. And by the way, before that, in comparison with Constantinople and its richness and beauty and cleanness, Paris looked like a dirty village. Wow, we should understand the reality. So, and it was quite not very small, but quite provincial place. And but then Louis IX received these relics and made the famous Sainte-Chapelle to keep these relics in the center of Paris, nearby his palace. And Sainte-Chapelle, which I think many in your audience could see by their own eyes. And it's interesting, not many people are thinking that Sainte-Chapelle is actually a replica of the Pharos Chapel in Constantinople. Because in the West, they used to call this place, this chapel with special relics, as a holy chapel. So Sainte-Chapelle is actually the reproduction of the Western name of the Pharos Chapel. And so he constructed this beautiful Gothic church to keep these 22 great relics in the so-called Grand Chas, or special luxury case, and which was over the altar, displayed over the altar, and it was for particular celebrations. The case was opened, and all people inside the church could see the relics. So, but if we continue with the story of these relics, so because it was a royal property, and it means they used to make regular inventories of the property with a description of particular objects. And we have this description of the Mandilion up to the revolution, when all these relics, most of them were thrown out and disappeared forever. With exception of four objects, which three of these objects are kept now in Notre Dame de Paris, and one object for the relic of the stone of the Holy Sepulchre is now in the Louvre. Well, it's very beautiful Byzantine case. But we have the description of the relic of the Mandilion, and quite precise, made by French clerics, but in very positive way, without any exaggeration, just fixation. So they said that it was a linen cloth with almost invisible image, and covered by the thin plates of gold. Well, around the image. Well, and also the cloth was broken in some parts. So, well, we have a kind of precise document with description of the image, and certainly in this description nothing common with the shroud, and well,
yeah,
was relatively small cloth.
Well, it's interesting that the story then of how the Mandilion then made its way through Baldwin II and then Louis IX to Paris, and then how it was inventoried, and then how the description of the cloth is on those inventories, and that it is a reasonable proof that the Mandilion cloth then was transferred over to France, and then unfortunately it was lost, it sounds like, during the French Revolution. So yeah, very interesting. Alexei, I'm gonna have to break. And very interesting. I could ask you a million other questions. There's you have such a wealth of knowledge on the shroud and the history of the shroud, and as well as on the Mandilion, and I'd love to spend hours with you talking, but I think we're going to have to close now. And I did want to mention to the audience that a lot of your papers are available on academia.edu. The one paper that I found most interesting, especially as it relates to the Mandilion, is called The Holy Face, Holy Script, Holy Gate, Revealing the Edessa Paradigm in Christian Imagery. And I found that one good. I'm sure that there's many others, and I'm sure you as well have a couple of books that are available as well. Alexei, thank you so much. Thank you for participating, and really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And
well,
so for the audience,
to your audience.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And please stay tuned for the audience for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. And please visit GuyPowell.com and sign up for more episodes. Again, Alexei, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.